What we've done so far is we've created a domain controller in a domain. Here's DC1. In the process, we ended up making a gopa.com domain inside a tree in a forest, kind of all built out there. So now what we want to do is add a second domain controller, just as for redundancy. Right now, that computer's sitting over here. It's sitting in its own little world as a single separate server. We want to do a couple things. One thing we want to do is we actually want to bring it into the domain first, then we promote it to be a domain controller. There's other ways of working with it, but that's kind of the easiest way to work with it. So then I'll bring it into the domain and then promote it as domain controller. One thing we need to do though is understand, I should say, is that if I'm a part of the gopa.com domain, I'll have to know where the gopa.com domain is, and that all has to do with DNS. So this is kind of a side note on DNS. What DNS is happening here is that this domain controller becomes the domain's DNS. So gopa.com, anything referenced to gopa.com is being referenced on this DNS server. What does DNS servers do again?
Domain name lookup.
What does that do?
It changes it from a IP address or website address to an IP address.
From a name to an IP address, right? Is that what you say, Alex?
Yes.
Right. Okay, so a name to an IP address. So anything referenced to gopa.com, including the domain name itself, is referenced there. So this is a logical layout right now. These domains, trees, and domains, trees, and forests are logical. It's not a physical. We still have a physical network. So say this is my physical network, and I'll have a switch here, and it's plugged into the server there, and plugged into the server there, and over here it goes to a router, which then gets me off and out to the network or internet or whatever. These machines, when I set them up, the DNS was pointing to over here, the 192.168.118.2 router, which is our default gateway, but it's also a DNS forwarder. So all your requests for your servers, like when you went to check, was that connected to the internet? Can you ping Google or whatever? It's going through your default gateway. We don't want it to go to 118.2 anymore because we want it to reference things dealing with GOPA, specifically the name, gopa.com. So we need to change this then to our domain controller 1, which in this case is going to be 118.12, because these servers are 118.12 and 118.13. So we need to change our DNS so that it looks to this DNS so it can resolve anything it needs to, even to join the domain. Then if that domain name server DNS doesn't know what to do, it will then forward it on to that one. So that's what ultimately is going to happen. So let's kind of work through that. I'm going to back out all these little arrows here, sort of clean things up a bit. Oh, not that far. So right now what we're going to do is bring this into the domain. So I'm going to go to my DC2 server.
And you have to have DC1 open to do this, right?
You have to have DC1 open to do this, correct.
And so
What we're going to do with DC2 is the same concepts as we did with DC1. We're just going to implement it differently because two reasons. One, it's a second domain controller. The second thing that's be different is that we're working with a graphical user, where you work with a command line instead of the graphical user interface.
Okay, but we are making this a domain.
We are going to make this a domain control. That's the ultimate goal for the day. So before we get into too much, we need to make a couple checks. Just like we did on our first server, we want to check on this server. So I want to go into sconfig to check this server. And a couple key things to check and one thing to change. We're just documenting at this point, not doing. So the first one is making sure our computer name is in fact DC2. If it's still name win whatever, now it's the time to change it, or some other complex name that you may have named it deliberately. I'd strongly encourage you just making it DC2. The next part is under the network settings. We need to make sure we have the right IP address of the network adapter. And so I'm going to hit number 1, take a look at that, and make sure that all the settings are correct. And right now I have 192.168.118.13. Make sure that all of these numbers are correct. If one of them is wrong, it's going to mess things up. It's making sure that your subnet mask is 255, 255, 255.0. And then the default gateway is 192.168.118.2. That hasn't changed. You know, that is just your well, I erased it now, but that's your default gateway. That's how you get off your network. Wrong server. Go over here. Here we go. Okay. My DNS, though, is still pointing to that default gateway. I want it to point to my domain controller 1. So to change that, I hit number 2 to set the DNS. And now it asks you to type in the IP address and make sure you use all the numbers correctly. 192.168.118.12. 118.12. So from now on, it's going to look to that DNS for any resolution of any names. I'm not going to have an alternate one yet because I don't have a secondary DNS yet, so I'm just going to leave it blank. And so I'm really done. So I'm going to go ahead and just exit the network configuration part. Now from here, from the command line, so I could exit to command line. You don't have to document this. This is just watching. From the command line, I could do all the things we just did. So I could use the commands of basically, what would it be specifically? Be like install Windows feature, Active Directory domain services, and put all the different switches and things like that on. That's very difficult to do. And then after that, do a DC promo, which is the domain controller promotion. So these can be done from the command prompt. We're actually going to do it a different way for 2 reasons. One, it's easier. And the second thing is I'm going to show you how you can remotely administer a second server. So it's going to do a twofold purpose here. So the first thing we want to do, like I said, is in fact join the domain. And you can do it from the command prompt, but we're going to use sconfig. Sconfig is just a very convenient tool. And right in number 1, it says domain or workgroup, and it says workgroup is workgroup. And we want to change that to a D for domain, though. Okay, what's the name of your domain? It should be gopa.com. And it's going to say, okay, this is a secret organization. You need to have, you know, like a secret handshake here. Who are you? And who says that you can come in? And we need to do both the domain name and the username. So it's gopa \administrator is the domain / username. And make sure the proper \. It's the one that's leaning back. Gopa administrator. Next, it asks you for the password. It's a special password. Don't get freaked out. Nothing shows up on the screen. So even though you're typing, go ahead and hit enter. It does ask you, boy, you're joining the domain. Now's the time to change the computer name, if at all. So I already changed it, so I'm good. So I don't need to change it. But if you're like, oh, I don't know if I did, or I forgot, oh, that's right, I forgot to do that. Here's kind of your last chance to rename it. Actually, you can do it later, but it's just a whole lot easier now. You must restart your computer to apply these changes. Go ahead and click yes. If it does this, you are good. If it says, what's this gopa.com thing you're talking about, that means you have something wrong. Usually it's an IP address setting. It's either DC1's IP address or DC2's IP address or DC2's domain controller's, a DNS server's IP address. Something's usually wrong in the configuration. After that, it could be an issue with the network configuration of how the network is set up or whatever, or some other communication issues. But generally, it's an IP addressing issue. It could be a username and password issue as well. Being a server core or being a non-graphical user interface, it does restart really fast. I'm using Control-Alt-Insert to log in. I can log back in. I use sconfig, and now I'm seeing that I'm part of the domain. Okay, now that I'm part of the domain, I can remotely actually manage this a little bit better. So I'm going to switch over to DC1. So I'm going to leave DC2 over here. In fact, what I'm going to do, just to make it a little bit more visible, is do a new window, new virtual machine window. and drag it over to the other screen. And then I'm going to take DC2 and move that over to my second screen. So you can sort of watch what's happening in DC2 while I'm working on it. So, okay, I'm on DC1 now, so I'm going to log in with Control-Alt-Insert, hit my special password to log in. I'm then going to click on All Servers. And under All Servers, well, I'm going to back up one more step. Sorry. I'm going to go to Tools and go to Users and Computers again, just to show you that it joined the domain. Under GOPA, I have a domain controllers container, and we're going to talk about containers next week. So, like, what's this container thing you talk about? So a DC1 is a domain controller. Under computers, though, you're going to see DC2. So you have a computer that joined the domain, just listed as a computer. So I have domain controllers and a computer. Our goal is to get that into there. And it's not just dragging and dropping. It's you actually have to install stuff. So, okay. I'm going to go to All Servers. I'm going to right-click on All Servers. I'm going to add a server to this. And because I'm part of the domain, it's going to look in the GOPA domain. I'm just going to click Find Now. It's going to find all the machines in the GOPA domain. Fortunately for us, we only have 2. If I had 500 of them running, they would actually find all 500 of them. I want to add DC2 to the list, so I click on DC2 and the little arrow next to it to bring it over to the selected list, and then I click OK. This is a really cool feature. So under Server Manager in DC1, I can look at other servers that I can keep adding more servers to this list. So right now I see DC1. If I scroll down, these are the events on DC1. Keep going down, those are the services on DC1. These are the performance of DC1, CPU usage and whatever, and then roles and features of DC1. Using the same server manager, all I do is just choose a different server up here, in this case DC2, and now I see the events, services, performance, and roles and features for DC2. So you can see everything about all the servers you want from one location. Even though there's no graphical user interface, that I can essentially have a graphical user interface, it's just remotely. Now from here, since I can control it from here, I'll show you 2 different ways of being able to add roles to a remote server. One is from the All Servers list, I just choose the server I want to work with, and I right-click on it, and I say Add a Role or a Feature. And that brings you to the Add Role and Feature wizard. Another way, and I hit Cancel. Another way of doing that is way back on your dashboard. Once you have all your servers added, you can just use your regular menus that you've been using of adding roles and features, and then click Next, and Next again. And now it's going to list all the servers that you can install stuff to. It's kind of like when Windows comes up and installs an operating system, it says, which of your hard drives do you want to install to? If you have 50 drives, you can choose from 50. If you've designated 30 servers over here, you can choose whichever server that you want. And I'm going to go to DC2, and I'm going to click Next, and I'm going to install Active Directory Domain Services, exactly like I did on DC1. As soon as I click the checkbox there, it brings up these additional features. Does this list look shorter to you than the feature list than you had the first time?
Yes. I'm going to say yes because you sound like it's a question that you're pointing to.
Is it a leading question? Yes, it is a shorter list. Why? There's no GUI tools. So I'm just going to install. So I'm going to install some modules, like for PowerShell, because that's a command line thing onto that server. But there's no GUI tools. So the actual installs and rollouts are actually going to be faster and smaller because you don't have that component. So I'm going to add those features. No additional roles, no additional features. Clicking Next and Next. And then I go and click Next. Restart if you need to, and click Install. And this is exactly the same as on a local computer as it is remotely. What's happening on my DC2? Nothing. You don't see it doing anything. So I could be sitting here at the screen looking at my console and not know that you're in fact installing a role on there. So it really doesn't show you anything, and that's what's kind of cool, but kind of freaking in the same regard.
All of a sudden it just restarts.
Correct. At the end of all of this, it's going to just restart.
Do you want us to catch up to you at this point, or?
Oh, what did I just do? Oh, no, just keep watching for right now, because I'm just going to finish this up, and then I'll let you do it. I still get the same promote to domain controller link as I got the first time on DC1. If I missed it and got just click happy, I still have my notification bar up on top that I can promote this server to domain controller. So it's this configuration required for DC2, promote it to domain controller. And now you see the exact same screen. I'm going to choose a different option though, potentially. From here, the default is add another domain controller to an existing domain. So I already have a domain, right? Is gopa.com. I just want a second domain controller out there. I could make it a completely different forest. Make a completely different organization and everything like that if I wanted to. I'm not going to. I'm going to make it. Now it says, of all the domains that are out there, which one do you want to be a domain controller for? Well, it's pretty easy because we only have gopa.com. I still need to do the credentials. So I click change again, just like I did before. It's saying, who allows you to access this domain?
I do.
The administrator allows access. And then go ahead and click next. Same things here, leave all the defaults up on top. We're not going to even talk about those. And you still do need a restore mode password. It can be the same as the last one, but it can be different. They're all unique. We'll never use it, so it doesn't really matter. Go ahead and click next. You might get an error about this. It's just a warning. A delegation for DNS servers cannot be created, blah, blah, blah. That's okay. We already have a DNS server, so this one we can actually skip past. Okay, you're saying that you already have a domain, which means you have a domain controller, and now you're going to be another domain controller, and you need to be identical to the domain control, other one that exists. Where are you going to get that data from? Well, we only have one other one, but say that we did have 5 domain controllers already, and I'm adding a 6th. You have a choice of where to copy it from. Now, you could have a domain controller in New York and Los Angeles and one in Cleveland. I would certainly hope that you would copy all the contents of the domain from the local one, so you're not taking the entire domain information across a WAN link, if in fact that was the case. So that's why they give you that option. But you can choose from any domain controller. We only have one. Same folders, structure. It's all the defaults.
So you want us to select or just grab it from DC1?
Any. Choose any is fine.
Okay.
And then again, just double checking, make sure, yep, I'm going to configure this. This is going to be another domain controller for gopa.com. Sounds good. Go ahead and click next. All prerequisites passed, even though I have some warnings. So I can go ahead and click install. I'll let it do its install. It's going to be much faster than the original one because I'm not creating a database. I do have to copy it, so there is time involved in that, but I'm not doing the whole tree, forest, domain creation and creating all those organizational units and groups and users for the first time. All I'm doing is saying, okay, it's already there, just give me a copy of it. If you notice, my DC2 is about to restart. And this, my DC1 tells me that it's all done. I go ahead and click close. I can go up to tools, users and computers again. And under computers, I don't have any computers listed anymore. But now, because it was promoted, it got promoted to be a domain controller. So it put it into that container, that organizational unit. So now I have 2 domain controllers for the same domain, and I can manage everything. I can, after DC2 is up and running like it is right now, I can feel very, very comfortable of shutting down DC1 and letting DC2 handle everything for a while I'm doing maintenance on DC1 or whatever. I bring DC1 back up, it resynchronizes if there were any changes, and I just keep running.